Now, here is Rona Barrett and friends in Los Angeles. Rona?
Thanks, Tom. Boy, Klein was really hot.
Hot, hot, hot.
Hot, 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 and we have three gentlemen who are also very hot. They certainly know how to make us scream. I'd like to introduce you to my guests tonight. On my right is John Carpenter. At the opening of the program, we saw a scene from one of his films, Halloween. And John also did a film called The Fog, and he recently came back from doing a film called Escape from New York, and in that film he has a character named George Romero. Now, I don't know if this is any coincidence or not, but the man on the right of John happens to be the very talented Mr. George Romero, who has given us the cult classics Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, and I'd like to take a look at a scene from one of his films right now.
Okay, downstairs again, same trick. Let's go.
Thank you, Mr. Romero. And my third guest is Jeannot Swark, who cut his teeth on television's excellent Night Gallery series and later went on to direct the super successful Jaws 2. And let's take a look at a scene now from a film called Bug. Now, don't go away. We'll be right back with more of that right after these words. I was just saying in the commercial break that bugs have always scared me, and they're so tiny, and we're so big. Why are we always so frightened of little things?
I think we're mostly frightened of the unknown, and that the unknown, also there's a connotation, I think, of sort of dirt and misery and mysterious things.
What do you think what?
How do you handle them? You can't shoot at them. They're very hard to hit.
I guess the only way you can really get them is to stomp on them. Is that it?
They're also so different, too, because they have legs that move a different way. They don't have feelings like we do, and they have different nervous systems. That's what's frightening to me about spiders and bugs. They're so strange and alien to what we know.
You know, all you fellas have scared half the world to death. Is there anything that really scares you?
Loss of control.
In what area?
Life. If I'm out of control of a situation, that's frightening to me.
You, George?
Last 3 Steeler games have been pretty rough.
No. Is there something that really can frighten you?
I think, to some extent, the same thing that John said, only not so much in my own life, because I have found myself in situations where I've felt out of control anyway, but just a seeming loss of control in terms of our perception of the world and what's happening with the world. There doesn't really seem to, which goes back to the presidential debate, which someone said before, that was the scariest.
That was one of the scariest shows of all.
But I think that feeling of the world being out of control is pretty is frightening to me, and being having nothing to say or do about that. You know, just sort of being on the train.
Things like nuclear wars frighten me too.
Yeah.
Oblivion and the end of everything.
Right.
But that's the same thing, loss of control. We can't control it. Big white flash, and that's it.
Do you have the same kind of feelings? You know, I mean, you fled your country.
Yes.
You know.
No, I'm frightened. I think the only thing that really scares me is physical violence, from man to man. In a way, that's why I think most of us really like horror films, because in horror films, it's very rarely violence from man to man. And it's a way of ventilating some of our, you know, the dark side of our souls without, you know, being sick about it.
The current
But physical violence frightens me.
Some of the current films, and I think that probably grew out of that Texas Chainsaw, Last House on the Left kind of thing, are man against man violence.
But that also that happens in trends. I mean, we go through periods when we have the creature always gets destroyed, and then we went through a period now when the creature then lives and man gets destroyed. Do you think there's some kind of a correlation between what's really going on out there in the world? I mean,
possibly. I think there's a big difference between the Tony Perkins character in Psycho, or even the boogeyman in John's Halloween, and something like Last House on the Left, where I think the point that we're supposed to come away with is that that's in the nature of man, and that man is basically a blackened soul, or has a blackened soul, and this will happen. Whereas the boogeyman in Halloween and the character in Psycho and other, you know, we were talking before about the 50s films.
The Thing.
The Thing. Them.
Very different attitude. I mean, it's something to be purged and expurgated rather than...
Also, I think at that time we were maybe a little bit less cynical. Horror films were much more in terms of good and evil and black and white, and, you know, the differentiation was very, very clear, and I think that clarity also was something that we all liked in films, because then you could, you know, see other things. But now I think it's not so clear.
Yeah, it always dealt with the restoration of order.
it's not so clear, but we have so many films, so many horror films out there. I think there are 20 right now out in the marketplace. Why do you think they're so popular now? Why now? I mean, they've always had their place, but why now? Come on, John.
I don't know. It may have something to do with the state of the world or the state of real life. I know that horror films came out of Germany originally, I think, and they came out of a post-war depressive period. And it seems like that's kind of what's going on now here. I think people maybe are looking for, as George says, a sort of a shared experience or a shared involvement in something on the screen. Some sort of an emotion that comes out of the screen. I think that's why people like them, because they can go and be frightened, almost be tested. Can I stand what I'm about to see? Am I going to be scared? And then it releases anxiety. If you scream and then you'll laugh afterwards, some of your tension's gone.
And it's safe, also, I think.
Safe.
True.
Well, I mean, deep down, you know that no matter how scared you get, you're still in the seat, you know, in the middle of a theater. So it's a high experience or high emotion by proxy in a way.
It's only a movie.
It's only a movie,
Yeah, it's
right?
only-
But that's
it's
true of
it's
all
escapism.
movie experiences.
It's
That's true
escapism.
of
I
a good
remember-
cry in a movie or a laugh in a movie.
I remember a couple of years ago, I had an interview with Hitchcock, and he said something. I asked him, why do you think people really like to be frightened? And he told me the story about, take a little baby. He says, there isn't a parent in the world when you have a little child, you don't throw them up in the air, and you can see the child scream and turn white, and then it lands in your arms, and it feels this protection, whether it's the mother or the father, and there usually comes loves and kisses and hugs, and so there is a relationship. People like to be frightened or scared because they then feel secure. What do you think?
Yes,
I
it's
agree.
true.
That's it?
Also, it's fun.
Fun?
Well, I think so. It's a peak experience.
It's like riding a roller coaster or going
Exactly.
in the dark.
It's the psychological, I think, equivalent of a roller coaster.
Look, all of you have made horror films. There has to be a formula, or isn't there a formula? George?
Gee, I don't think there's a formula per se. I think it is parasitic in a certain sense because it's a very involving process and a very long process to make a film. And very often I think you don't even realize what you're doing when you're operating on instinct. And so I think that what you probably do, or I think that what I probably do, is recall things, even if it's subliminally, that I've seen. And I don't find myself consciously trying to emulate something or to repeat a sequence that I saw done in a certain way, but I don't have an overall formula to the whole movie. I do find myself in sections of the movie or in moments of the movie calling up techniques, and all techniques that I probably have seen before. But it's a matter of how you glue them together and what you do with them and how you change them. I don't think it's hard to say that there's a formula across the board for making someone scared.
John, I understand that when you were watching Halloween, you said, "Ah, those bag of tricks."
I said cheap tricks.
Oh, cheap tricks. Oh, cheap tricks.
Cheap tricks meaning there was the sequence when she's against the door and the guy swings out, and it's a jump. I mean, it's something that suddenly leaps out at you out of the screen, which I think is a cheap trick. I love cheap tricks, but that is one. I just sort of belittle my own work. But to add to something he was saying, though, that I think that from a director's standpoint, a horror film that expresses a feeling of the director in a personal way is important. I think maybe some of the horror films don't. They capitalize and exploit other films that have happened. But George's films, I remember seeing Night of the Living Dead when I just came out to college at USC. And I felt it was a really strong but personal film in an odd way, and very funny too.
Well, I felt much closer to that film. Dawn of the Dead. See, Dawn of the Dead to me is not a scary film. It's not a nightmare film at all. It's a very surface kind of. It's a grand guignol. It's very bawdy, which is not.
And also has a lot of humor, doesn't it?
Well, it's low. To me, it's a comedy.
The whole shopping mall thing about and the zombies walking around. Yeah.
So in other words, I was synthesizing those feelings that hopefully were there, and thank you for saying that in the first one. But I was synthesizing them with Dawn of the Dead and putting it into sort of some kind of a socio-political overlay, and then just doing cheap tricks too, because I love them too.
Chanel?
Well, to go back, I don't think there is a general formula, but I think there are patterns. But you know, there's such a variety of horror films. There's shock, there's suspense, there's, creature versus man, nature versus man. But there are patterns, I think, particularly when it comes. See, what John was describing is basically shock, and I think basically in shock, what it is that the audience has a parallel amount of information as the people in the picture. Like, you know, the girl goes up the stairs to her bedroom, and suddenly she opens the door and there's a man with a knife. But in suspense, it's the reverse. The audience is ahead. That's what Hitchcock kept on doing. He first shows you the man in the bedroom with the knife, then the girl goes up to her bedroom just as she's about to open the door. The phone rings downstairs. She's got to go downstairs. She comes back, then the cat meows. That's suspense. So in that term, there are some general patterns. But I think there's no formula.
Suspense in Halloween.
Yes,
Yet
tremendous.
Halloween is a classicist piece, if you will. It's very gothic in a way. It's like a gothic piece in suburbia.
Does terror fall into this category? I mean,
Terror
is there a
can be
difference?
both suspense or shock. Depends.
Both suspense and shock?
Sure. I think Dr. Phibes, you know, which is a very bizarre film. The end has the most bizarre suspense scene I think ever in the history of films. It's The Operation. The Operation. Vincent Price is taking revenge because the woman he loved was killed during an operation. So he kidnaps the son of the surgeon, puts him on this table, plants in his head the key. He's in manacles, and there's a little bottle with acid on top of the child. And it'll take 9 minutes for the acid to hit his face. And the father has 9 minutes to operate the child, take out the key, and open the handcuffs. And that was really a mixture of both. I mean, it was as horrible as you could get, but it was suspense, because you were waiting for something.
Hold all the thoughts, the good ones, the bad ones, and whatever. We'll be back right after these messages.
Before we go to the station break and come back to you, I just have to know something. Are we going to see any more of the leeches crawling on this guy's belly, or is that over for a while?
For tonight, it's a little bit over, but we might surprise you with somebody else.
Well, no surprises like that, please. That gets a
Why
little...
not? Tonight's a good night.
Well, we all have queasy stomachs back here in New York tonight, for some reason or other. How does the guy die? Does he die out getting the blood sucked out of him, or do we want to reveal that? I don't know.
Well, we're not going to tell you. You're just going to have to go see the movie.
Okay. We'll be right back to Rona and Friends in Los Angeles after this for our NBC television stations coast to coast.
Was it difficult for Brad Dillman in The Bug to take those little bugs all over his body?
Yes, they're quite harmless, you know, they're just very disgusting to look at, and they're about this big, and we just did the scene very quickly. I mean, while we were doing it, Brad Dillman kept on saying, well, let's just get it over with. And also, you know, they follow direction very badly, the cockroaches. I mean, they would not always go where they were supposed to, but we finally got the scene.
George, every one of the films that I've seen seem to have a real sociological message, your pictures. What is it that you want to say to the public?
I don't think that I'm saying anything new. I don't think I'm coming up with certainly not coming up with answers, not even with new questions. It's just sort of a conscious overlay of the things that seem to be puzzling us today. And I just make it an important part of the surface of the film.
What do zombies represent?
Yes.
To some extent, yeah.
We the people?
Just a sort of commitment, in a sense, to follow a lifestyle without any choice. The zombie's always been a very sympathetic character to me. He's always the one out, down, picking the crops while Lugosi was up in the castle, you know.
Do you think of people as being victims?
To some extent, and I don't think that they even understand exactly what it is. It's what I was saying before in terms of what frightens me. Who knows what's going on out there? You know, we don't know any more about what's going on in the real world than we do in the metaphysical world today. And I think that's the problem. There are no answers to anything, and don't we wonder what we're doing, you know? And why are we going along with all that?
I always liked the zombies in your films because they had very specific purposes. They were very hungry, and they had very specific limitations. They couldn't move very fast.
Right.
And if you killed them, they get back up again. I always thought they were all right.
John, I want to bring something to mind. It was a very tantalizing statement that you made. You said, the reason that horror films are so popular is that audiences want to see something that's forbidden. My question to you is there a relationship between sexual erotica and horror?
I think there's a relationship maybe between aggression and sexuality. Horror, I don't know. I think that the wanting to see something forbidden is always been a part of human nature. Like going to see an automobile accident and you want to see what happened, run around it. To be frightened, to be thrilled, to be scared. Yeah, I think that's why audiences are going.
Just said yes, yes.
Well, in some genres, I think in vampirism, definitely there is a sexual connotation. And even psychologically, the myth of the vampire and so on. And it hasn't been done in film. Now it's sort of, but I think there was an Italian film by Mario Bava called Black Sunday. I think that was the English title. And it was, in it, the vampires were beautiful women. A beautiful woman in particular. I think it was the first film that used vampires that way. And it was very erotic.
Well, those Christopher Lee movies.
Yeah, the Christopher Lee movies too.
The women
also,
they just say, here, come on, let's go. And here he comes.
And that was long before, you know, the New York production of...
Well, I know, but in many horror films, we always seem to have the damsel in distress, the so-called virgin in distress. I mean, there must be something to it. No?
Well, you know, some people think that also horror films, in a way, are sort of projection of our psychology and beauty and all that, but I don't know if that's true. Also, there hasn't been a demoiselle in distress for quite a long time, I think, in horror films.
Yeah.
What about the gore in your films, especially yours? Are you afraid that...
Yes, George, what about that?
George, what about the gore?
I think Tom Savini does a sensational job.
Are you afraid you're desensitizing an audience?
No, I believe that to some extent the audience has already been desensitized. Well, I don't like to use that word because I think that, I said a little earlier that I think that audiences perceive, particularly horror films, particularly some of the new wave horror films, as something akin to rock. music. And after everything that we've seen, it's pretty hard to go a couple of steps further. It's also very hard as a filmmaker to contain yourself or to want to back off behind what has already been out there. And I think that to some extent it's expected. I don't think it's harmful in a fantasy context. I don't think that violence in a horror film is as traumatizing as violence in The Deer Hunter or in Taxi Driver.
I mean, do you feel you have a responsibility, though? Are you afraid that at some time you might put a scene in there that might incite your audience?
I feel more of a responsibility to the fans of the genre to do something that they want to see.
Yes, horror films are fairy tales for adults. And I don't know if it desensitizes. I think what desensitizes is when you see death meaningless or pain meaningless. I think that desensitizes. When death is portrayed as if it was nothing, you know, people die like flies, it doesn't mean anything. I don't know if horror films do that. First, they're in context of fantasy. And then, you know, I think there is pain, there is vulnerability. There's very little sadism because there's very rarely, you know, horror from human being to human beings.
Right, when I said desensitized, that's why I said I didn't like to use the word. I just mean that people have been exposed to it and are immune to it to some extent. Not everybody, but people that are dyed-in-the-wool fans have seen a lot of pretty explicit violence in the context of horror films.
I have a feeling we could go on and discuss this subject for a number of hours, maybe days and months, but I think the time is right to go back to Tom in New York. Tom?
All right. Thank you, Rona. Thank you all, gentlemen. A special hello to my friend Geno back there. I still don't believe he makes all those pictures with those leeches. My.
Geno Soir?
Geno Soir. Of course, tell him that he can hear me, you know, in Jaws 2, when they had the sharks and the kids, I was cheering for the sharks by the time it was over.
Tom said he was cheering for the sharks in Jaws 2.
We will continue now with Sandra McNeil, who is an author, a Canadian television personality, and an expert on the subject of psychic power, right after these announcements from our sponsors and the NBC television stations.